Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to AI Scouted. Don't worry, Dave is back, but it makes more sense for me to host this one. So I will welcome Karl first, because me and Dave have to catch up on our league titles. How are you doing, Karl?
I'm not too bad, thanks. Delighted to be number 2 on the podcast out of 3 today. Well deserved, in my opinion.
How it should be. I mean, you've got to be quiet for a couple of minutes now, because I've got to catch up with Dave, so shut up.
Okay.
Hello, David. How are you feeling after COVID?
I'm better. Not great, but better.
Good. But as you listeners know, we started our season preview thing the other day without Dave, so we do have to catch up with Dave about the big 6 from last season, or the top 6, I should say. So we'll go through this quite quickly because we don't want a 2-hour pod. So Dave, where do you think Liverpool will finish?
I think we'll finish second. We lose Origi, we lose Sadio, we lose Taki. That's 3 sources of goals gone. We bring in Núñez, we bring in Carvalho. I think it's a big ask to ask both of them in their first season to make up the goals of 3 players, even though I think in the long run they will. We bring in Calvin Ramsey. I do like that signing. I like the other sales we made, Nico Williams and Ben Davies. I think we got good prices. But we haven't addressed our midfield at all, and that's a massive concern to me. You look at our midfield group, and I mean, after Fabinho and Thiago, it's a big drop-off to Naby, then a big drop-off to Henderson and Harvey Elliott, who are obviously going in different directions in their career. But Harvey is a kid, and I'm not relying on a kid. Then it's a drop-off again to Curtis and Ox, neither of whom I think are good enough to play for Liverpool this season on a regular basis for different reasons. And again, they're going in opposite directions in their career. And then it's a big drop-off again to the corpse of James Milner. So for me, the midfield, which let us down last season, is going to let us down again this season. I wouldn't be reliant on the fitness of Jordan Henderson in back-to-back seasons, considering if we look at the 8 seasons in which Jurgen Klopp has been Liverpool manager, in 6 of them, no, is it 7 of them? 7 seasons? Or whichever. 15-16, he misses a chunk of the season. 16-17 misses a chunk of the season. 17-18, he's fit. 18-19, he's fit. 19-20 misses a chunk of the season. 20-21 misses a chunk of the season. It's actually 5 of the 8 seasons that Klopp has been manager. Henderson has missed a big chunk of the season. And it was awful last season. Absolutely awful. Poor the season before. So I'm not reliant on him in any way, shape or form. I think we'll finish second.
You party pooper. We both predicted first. Man City then. I mean, if it's not first, you're still clearly delirious from COVID.
No, it is first. It is first. I mean, they've improved, in my view. You look at the players that they've left, and Fernandinho is a blow from an experience point of view, but Calvin Phillips is a massive upgrade on the Fernandinho they've had as a player from the last couple of years. They lose Gabriel Jesus, and again, it's a massive upgrade with Erling Haaland. They sell Raheem Sterling. They bring in Julian Alvarez. Now, that's obviously a downgrade because Sterling is a great player, but I think the overall balance of those 3, I think they're much better off. Now, Zinchenko's gone as well. The expectation is they'll bring in Marc Cucurella, or it could be Borna Sosa. Either way, that's an upgrade of a left back over Zinchenko. So I think City have improved. I know they've sold a lot of players, but they've only sold 4 players that will actually matter in terms of first team minutes, and they're going to have replaced them all. I think they've also upgraded the backup goalkeeper spot with Ortega. Not a big upgrade over Zach Steffen, but a moderate upgrade. All things considered, I just think they're going to be a better squad. It is a big question mark over changing how they play to bring in Haaland. And frankly, I thought Haaland looked poor in his debut. I know he scored, but he looked like a camel trying to control a tennis ball at times. So, there's going to be some settling in there. But overall, their defense is almost as good as ours. Their attack is as good as ours, and their midfield is significantly better than ours. I think City will win the league.
And Chelsea, who many last season thought would be in the title race, turned out not really. And obviously pre-season's not gone their way, and Barcelona have signed all their transfers. So how do you see Chelsea's season going?
Well, the bullying of Chelsea by Barcelona is a magnificent thing, where they've been able to pay less for Rafinha and less for Jules Koundé and less wages than Chelsea were offering. But they bring in Raheem Sterling. That massively upgrades their attack. There's no other way to look at that. That massively upgrades their attack. And Kalidou Koulibaly is simply a better centre-back than Antonio Rudiger or Andreas Christensen. So they do need to get another centre-back in, and they probably need 1 or 2 other bits. But I actually think they've improved this summer compared to what they had last season. They'll have, fully fit Reece James again. They'll have Broja back if they choose to keep him. They'll have Levi Colwill back. So their depth is going to be better. They're going to have Conor Gallagher back. So again, their midfield depth is going to be better. So overall, I do think they've improved. But I'm going to go with them to drop 1 position in the league to 4th, because I think there's going to be some changes to how they play and the setup and the shape. I think while those things are in movement, I think they could drop a few points here and there. There'll be a gap between 1st and 2nd and 3rd and 4th, but I do think Chelsea in 4th is a fairly safe bet. I don't see any possibility of them dropping out of the top 4 personally.
I feel the shots fired at me there, Dave. Spurs, then, I'm guessing you're going 3rd with them.
I've got Spurs in 3rd, yeah. I've got Spurs in 3rd. Conte with a full season and a pre-season, which is important. You look at the players coming in. Perisic is an upgrade at left wing back. Yves Bissouma is a massive upgrade in midfield. Jed Spence is an upgrade at right wing back. And Richarlison is a great addition in attack in that he can cover both Son and Kane. Now, my concern with them is they haven't addressed their issues at centre-back. I know they brought in Clement Langley, but as Karl will absolutely have told you, he's just not very good.
Adding to the issues at centre-back.
Yeah, they're going to, as things stand, they're starting either Eric Dyer and Ben Davies or Eric Dyer and Clement Langley. Neither of those situations is ideal, but there is still time left in the window. They are still apparently on the look for a centre-back. But it is Antonio Conte. This guy won a Premier League title playing a back 3 of Cesar Azpilicueta, David Luiz, and Gary Cahill.
True.
That's not better than what he has at Spurs. Romero alone makes the Spurs defence better than those 3. He's got better wing backs at Chelsea, or at Spurs rather, than he did at Chelsea. Spence is better than Victor Moses, and Perisic, Reguilon, and Sessegnon are all better than Marcus Alonso. I like the midfield. I think the pairing of Bissouma and Bentancur with Ollie Skip and Højbjerg as depth, I think that's really strong. And they're going to be really good up front. And Harry Kane is likely to play for the first half of this season and not just wander about. So I've got Spurs in 3rd.
Moving on to the other half of North London then, obviously Lego Head and stuff like that, but do you see them closing the gap to 4th at all?
No, I don't, because they've got to contend with Europe this season, which they didn't last season. Last season was a perfect storm for them. Spurs were an absolute train wreck for half the season. They had Nuno Espirito Santo in charge. They sacked him. They bring in Conte. There's no consistency. There's no motivation with a lot of the players. Kane doesn't bother his arse until January. You had United as a complete dumpster fire all season long. You had Chelsea under restrictions and with chaos everywhere, not really knowing what they were doing. And then you had West Ham running out of steam in the second half of the season because they couldn't deal with Europe and the Premier League because their squad was so small. You had Arsenal with no European football having a week between games to prepare. And by prepare, of course, what I mean is Arteta travelling to Manchester and rooting through the bins outside Pep Guardiola's house, looking for any scraps of paper with some tactical insight on it. And then he would come back and try and put that into position with Arsenal. Now he's going to have to cope with Europe. I think that's going to be a struggle for him. They've spent a lot of money, but I don't know that they've had anything more than a mediocre window. I mean, Fabio Vieira is very, very talented. He's a squad player. Marquinhos is a squad player. Matt Turner is a squad player. Gabriel Jesus is a starter, but I don't know how much of an upgrade he is on Lacazette. It is an upgrade. I just don't know that it's a big upgrade. I think Lacazette as an all-round player is probably better than Gabriel Jesus, but Gabriel Jesus is more of a goal threat. And then Zinchenko, if he's to be the left back, that's a downgrade from Kieran Tierney. If he's the midfielder, it's an upgrade on Xhaka because it's Granit Xhaka and he's crap, but it's still a question mark because he's not played in Premier League midfields a whole bunch. If he's just a squad player, then you're still starting Granit Xhaka. You're in all likelihood still starting Ben White. You've got no depth at right back and Tomiyasu is injury prone. And you've got Ramsdale in goal, who might have had a good first half to last season, but we all saw what he was in the second half of last season. I have Arsenal finishing 6th.
We have the first 6th place team of the made-up table. Now, this should be interesting. Man United, higher or lower than Arsenal?
Lower, 7th for Manchester United. For me, don't really understand any of their business thus far. They had no need at all for a left back. You've got Luke Shaw. You've got Alex Telles. Yeah. They're not ideal, but they're both good players. And in 2022, they're both better players than Malacia. So I don't really understand why you'd spend that money there where you've got a screaming hole at right back. Christian Eriksen, obviously I love him as a player. I don't know where he plays, because he can't play as a 10 because you've got Bruno. Are you going to play him on the wing? I mean, is that really the best use of Christian Eriksen? Does that really fit with how you want to play? He's not playing in a double pivot. So I don't really know where he plays. As much as I like him, I don't understand that move. I think he's been kind of motivated by the money. And Lisandro Martinez, I do like. And I think if you played a back 3, he could be really good on the left side of it. If you wanted him as cover, like Arsenal did on the left side centre-back and left-back positions, if you play a defensive-minded left-back, I think that's absolutely fine. I think he could do a good job as your holding midfielder. But United apparently want him to be their starting left-side centre-back in a back 4. And he's 5'9". And they paid well above what the odds were on him. I mean, when Arsenal were linked with him first, they bid 32 million and the price was rumoured to be about 35. That's what Ajax were holding out for. And United have paid 47 million plus add-ons. Now, I know Harry Maguire isn't perfect, but I would trust Harry Maguire more in a back 4 in the Premier League than I would trust Lisandro Martinez. So I don't think they've improved. I don't think they've touched the midfield. They've spent over a month now chasing the tail on Frankie de Jong, who clearly doesn't want to go there. Like, clearly does not want to go there. If Frankie de Jong went to Manchester United, he would get 300 grand a week, which is 15 million a year on a 5-year contract, and a signing bonus of 1 year's wage, because United are so desperate to get him. So that's 90 million. You add in goal bonuses and potential trophy bonuses, etc., etc. He could be getting himself a contract that guarantees him 90 million and could earn himself 100 million over 5 years. Instead, he wants to stay at Barcelona, take a pay cut, another pay cut, and potentially lose out on a bunch of money, all to not go to Manchester United. So, I mean, they haven't addressed that position, the holding midfield position. They're still trying to keep Cristiano, although I do think privately they probably want rid of him. It's just that no one wants him. So that's a saga. That's going to be a distraction for the first few weeks of the season. Will he play? Because he's been on strike for pre-season. Then you've got Anthony Martial, who apparently is back, and this is going to be his season. It's going to be the breakout year. But, I mean, like, let's be really honest about this fella. In his last 2 seasons of football, he's scored 9 goals. He's got 1 season in his career where in the Premier League, where he has now been a player for 7 years, he's scored more than 11 goals. 1. Like, there's just no track record with this fella that makes you think we can absolutely trust him. But you're looking for a bounce back year from him. You're looking for a bounce back year from Marcus Rashford, who Karl himself have talked about before, has had 2 fairly poor seasons, although I do think his 2021 season was largely hampered by injuries. And last season, I think he was exhausted. But still, you're going to be asking him to have a bounce back year. You're massively relying on a bounce back year for Jadon Sancho. I mean, there's just so many question marks over this team. And they're going to be looking at a massive change in how they play. I'm going to go 7th for Manchester United.
Yeah, I think we all agreed on 7th there for United. I think we worded it as 1 step back, 2 steps forward, potentially for them. But it might be more like 3 steps back and 5 steps forward eventually. But we'll move on to some newer teams. And hello, Karl. It's been a while. We'll look at their summer business quickly, and then we'll get Karl's thoughts on West Ham. So they've got Ogard, the centre-back from Rennes, Areola on a permanent after his loan spell last season, some young lad called Patrick Kelly, Flynn Downs from Swansea, Gianluca Scamacca with the best reveal in football history. And they've lost Ryan Fredericks, David Martin, Mark Noble, Andrea Yarmolenko, and Sonny Perkins. Karl, West Ham obviously last season had a very thin squad, and that kind of cost them in the end. They obviously focused on the Europa League. They ended up finishing 7th, but it was ultimately a very promising season for them, but promising back-to-back seasons from them. Do you see them? Do you see them building on let's say, success of last season?
To be brutally honest, it depends if they add anybody else. I think that they were very good again last season in spells. They were quite a versatile and adaptable team. I like the fact that they can play any kind of side and have their own way of playing, which is not reliant on just being counter-attackable, not reliant on just set pieces, but they kind of have a little bit of everything going on. And I think that the signings that they have made kind of allude to that continuing, to be honest. I think they could really do with a bit more pace in attack, if I'm being honest, in that line behind the forwards. That's a big thing. I think that they did miss at times last year. If you're trying to counter-attack with, like, you know, the skeleton of what was once Manuel Lanzini, Fornals is not exactly rapid. It's very, very difficult sometimes to go into sort of counter situations or counter pressing situations, and you've only really got Bowen and Antonio when he's not got a hamstring issue. Even like from midfield, Souček, Rice, they're not fast, so they could do with a bit more there. I think that would make a big difference to them. I don't think that there's any reason at all to suspect that they'll drop off. You know, the players that they've lost are only support players at best, really. Mark Noble was basically a 17-minute sub last season, and not all of those were particularly good. Yarmolenko was obviously a bit more of a loss in terms of what he brought to the team, but he wasn't a regular starter or anything like that. So I don't think that they're worse off this year at all. I think Areola, if they can get him to be first choice sooner rather than later, will be a good thing for them. Again, being injured obviously already is not good, and they'll hopefully have him back sooner rather than later, but I think he needs surgery. So it might kind of be more or less the same as it was last year, because I can see Scamacca maybe takes a little bit of time to get used to what Moisey wants from him. I do want to get Dave's thoughts on the differences of Scamacca versus Haller, who just didn't get a look in under Moyes at all, because there's a few similarities between them. So I'm wondering how that's going to pan out. I do think he's a decent player, but I'm not sure that it makes a whole lot of sense in isolation if you look at the ins and outs there. But I like West Ham in general, how they're set up and what they have the possibility to do this season. But if Aguerd is going to be out for any reasonable length of time, I still think they need another centre back, and another centre mid would probably go a long way towards helping them not fade in the second half of the season with the Europa Conference League still this year.
Dave, your thoughts on Scamacca?
I love him. I think he's a more aggressive player than Haller, which I think was Haller's big downfall in the Premier League. I also think when we look at Haller, how much did he play with Bowen? Not a whole bunch. So he didn't have that kind of player that he needed who'd get close to him and support him, whereas Scamacca will have that. They're also looking to bring in Filip Kostic at the minute, who's arguably the best left-footed crosser in the world, which is going to help, something that they didn't really have when Haller was there. They didn't have the supply line that Haller needed. They didn't have the support. They just weren't as good a team either. They've taken significant steps forward. There's also the possibility to play Scamacca as one of two up front with Antonio and go with like a Twin Towers attack that will just bully people. That's an option for them. I love the signing of Areola on a permanent. I think he has to be first choice this season. There's no question he's better than Fabianski. Aguerd is a big upgrade at centre-back. The injury's tough, but Ogbonna is back. So they could use him for the first couple of months. I do agree they probably could do with one more at centre-back because Issa Diop doesn't seem to have the confidence of the manager. So maybe you're better to sell him and bring someone else in, which a few West Ham fans think is what they'll do. I like Flynn Downs in midfield, but they do need one more because you look at last season and it was really a three-man rotation with Noble as the third one, and he was garbage last season. He was garbage the last 3 years, let's be fair. Downs will be an upgrade on him, but I still think they need one more in midfield to help Rice and Souček split the load. And I think they need a starting left back because Aaron Cresswell, quite frankly, is just past his best. And
I'm guessing you see Kostic as a left winger, unless he changes to three at the back.
My assumption is he'll be a left winger. I feel like they'll play him as the left winger, maybe Fornals as the 10, Bowen on the right, and then Scamacca up front. And look to bring in a left back as well. Like they've been looking at David Rom, they've missed on him, but there's a few others that have been linked that are interesting. I just don't see Kostic as a left back. I think you'd be asking a lot of him defensively, and defensively he's not great. But I like what they've done. I think they've improved their depth a bit. They've improved their starting 11, which is important. Like if Scamacca is the starter, Antonio's the backup. That's much better than what they had last season. It's a better starter and a better backup. Areola as the first choice keeper is an upgrade. Aguerd is an upgrade, and having Ogbonna as his backup going into the season is pretty strong. And then you've got obviously Zuma, Dawson, who I'm not massively keen on, but had a decent season last year. I think they're going in the right direction. I think having had the season playing Premier League and Europa League, I think they'll be better conditioned to deal with Europe and Premier League this season. They're also in the Conference League, which is going to be easier for them. So I think we'll see more rotation, especially in the first half of the season in the group stage in Europe, which means they'll be keeping the likes of Rice and Souček a bit fitter for the Premier League. I have them fifth. as things stand. And I'm quite comfortable with that pick of them in fifth. I don't think they'll necessarily be all that close to Chelsea. Like, I could see there been 8 points between fourth and fifth, maybe even a little bit more. But I do have West Ham in fifth. I think they're a better team than both Arsenal and United. I think they've had a better summer than both Arsenal and United. And I think they've got a better manager than both Arsenal and United. So I'm going West Ham in fifth.
Karl, final thoughts on West Ham and where they finish?
Yeah, I mean, if they add Kostic, I mean, we've done our placings and predictions so far based on what's already done rather than what could happen, which was obviously a big thing for both of us talking about United last time out. But if they get Kostic, that's huge for them. Like Dave says, there's not a better crosser in Europe from that side of the pitch over the last few years. His delivery is not just very good, but very consistent as well. You think back to the partnerships he's had with like Andrew Silva, for example, and a couple of other forwards over the last few years. It's been
Sebastian Haller been one of them.
Yes, it's been a big part of the reason why Eintracht have thrived and have done as well as they have done, again, in European competition as well. So that would be a really good signing. I would definitely not play him in a back four, but West Ham have switched, obviously, to play 3 and wing backs, and he could do that. I wouldn't say it's probably the best use of him at this stage either, advancing years and all that. But in a 4-2-3-1, I would also very much like to see Antonio played a little bit deeper as the 10 behind the forward, because his channel running, his ability to track back into midfield, obviously used to play much deeper as well. I think that's something that West Ham could look to utilise. And then that does give you that extra bit of speed that I was talking about as well in the line of 3. So that would be very, very good for them. As it is at the minute, I'm going to put them 6th. I think I went with Arsenal 5th at the minute in the last pod. So West Ham into 6th.
You did go Arsenal 5th. So, yeah, I've got them 6th as well. Moving on then to Leicester. I don't know why I scrolled up on the transfer thing, because they have not made any transfers. They have lost Jakupovic, Daly Campbell, loads of toddlers, who cares? I mean, Dave, Leicester's an odd one, because we know the Brendan Rodgers rot does set in, and seeming that was last year. Fofana has been linked with Chelsea in recent days, which would be a huge loss for Leicester, seeing as they're not looking to buy anyone. Kasper Schmeichel was linked with, was it Nice or Rennes?
Nice.
Was it
Nice? It looks like that might happen as well.
Yeah, so they're probably going into the season with losing a senior goalkeeper who's been there for donkey's years now, possibly their best prospect in many, many years, in Fofana, and probably their best centre-back currently. It just seems like a really odd summer from Leicester so far, in terms of they had a really stagnant season, but they've not done anything to address it.
Yeah, I just think it's bizarre. I mean, Rodgers spoke about the need for a big reshuffle this summer, then kind of walked that back a little bit. I don't think there's a whole lot of money to spend. They've been living outside of their means for a few years now, trying to back him. And of course, back-to-back bottling of what were straightforward top 4 finishes, and then last season's unmitigated mess. There's a lot to like about their team. I mean, James Justin, Fofana, Ricardo Pereira, you're getting close to having a good back 4 there. I like Luke Thomas as well. Soyuncu's fallen off a cliff. Johnny Evans is injury prone. They needed to bring in a centre-back. They haven't done it. The Kasper Schmeichel thing is a bit strange to me. Like, he's got a year left on his deal. I don't know why you'd be letting him go for free this summer when you could just hold on to him for a year. So that one's a bit odd. Has there been a falling out with Rodgers? If he goes, they'll have to replace him, because I don't think you're going to trust Danny Ward at 29 to all of a sudden become a starting Premier League goalkeeper.
And lost your third choice keeper there as well.
And lost your third choice, exactly. In midfield, I mean, there's question marks over Tielemans. He's got a year left in his deal. Does he want to be there? Maddison and Didi, they're both out in 2024. Are they there long term? I mean, there's just questions everywhere. They haven't addressed anything. So I do think there's reason to be concerned. I also think the Rodgers rot is real. He has been at Leicester longer than he was at Liverpool, longer than he was at... not as long as he was at Liverpool, but the rot was absolutely in by this point at Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's there longer than he was at Celtic. So I do think there's a real possibility that the Brendan thing is terminal. I'd be surprised if he sees out the season, in all honesty. I think they'll drop a few spots from last season. I'm going to put them in 10th. And if they lose Fofana, that's their bottom half.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe the rot would set in as well. And when it does go wrong with Rodgers, it goes extremely wrong. I mean, Karl, Dave's mentioned a bit of the starting 11 there. I mean, obviously, a lot of talented players in Fofana and Justin and stuff like that. But I don't know how they'll set up. Like, Rodgers flip-flops between a 3 at the back, 4 at the back, etc. Messes about with the forward line all the time in the midfield. Doesn't like Samare by the sounds of it. Tielemans wants out of the club. Ndidi was injured basically all of last season. So there's a lot of question marks. I mean, how do you see them setting up, and how do you see them going ahead in the season?
Not very consistently. This is the thing that I've seen from Rodgers several times now. When it does start to go a bit pear-shaped, he doesn't seem to be able to settle on a system, the way of playing, which obviously is the big thing that he instills at the beginning, kind of disappears as well. And it seems a very, very difficult task for him and for his coaching staff to be able to sort of get back to the basics, as we would say, the fundamentals of why they were put there in the first place. They just seem to disappear. I find it really, really weird how often he has this thing as well, where he'll sign a player and 12 months later has completely taken them out of his mind and ignores them to the extent of they can go, we'll take a loss. I don't care how good they were when we signed them, nothing at all. And Samari seems to be the latest one of this, which is just, it's just bizarre. I mean, you consider how he played before he left Liga and how Leicester were trying to use him last year. There's not really a very good matchup there. He doesn't really seem to have been utilised in the best way possible. And just to basically bin him off now entirely it's just a very, very odd thing to do, I think. I actually have them in 10th as well.
I have them 11th. But I mean, last question on Leicester before we go, and I'll ask it to both of you. Do you think Rodgers gets sacked this season?
Yes. I think those owners are very ambitious. We saw with Claude Puel that there's no sentiment there. They'll just move him on. They sacked Ranieri like 8 months after he won them a league title. Ranieri won a Premier League title with Leicester City, who weren't nearly as good as this Leicester City team, and they binned him out the door. I think Brendan's FA Cup win saved him last season from the sack. I don't think it saves him this season.
I think it'll depend on how they start. If this is a Leicester season where they're like 15th, 16th and have to work their way up to 10th, that's quite different from like a decent start and going from 6th, 7th and having that hope of European football and then dropping off later in the season. And when you look at the start that they've got, Brentford, Arsenal, Saints, Chelsea, United, Brighton, Villa, it's not easy. There's not really any. There's not too many teams from the bottom bit there. It's more like the teams who they are going to hope to be above or competing with, like those Arsenal, Man United games. So if they get decent results in those ones, I think he probably does see out the season if they make a decent start. But if it is a difficult start and you get to sort of September, October and they've not picked up too many wins at all, I won't be surprised if that is the end of the road.
Yeah, I fully agree. Karl, I'll stick with you for Brighton. Transfer-wise, Julio Encesio, I probably said that wrong, youngster from Paraguay, I think it is. Another youngster who I think is from Porto called Baker Boati, something like that. And Simon and Dingra from Nordsjælland as well. I think they've signed Undav and a Japanese lad whose name is escaping me in January. Where is he? Karu Mitomo. So they have made signings. We obviously know they need goals. They've not really replaced, unless Mitomo's that type of player. They've not replaced Basuma yet, but they've not really added as many as I thought they would. But they have obviously got the Cucurella situation to deal with as well. So Brighton almost standing still.
I mean, I feel like we just replay this conversation every summer with Brighton. They need a number 9. They need somebody to score them goals. They need somebody who is going to be able to put the ball in the back of the net at the end of all the lovely flowing passes. I do like, in general, how the squad is built. I think the way that they play is suited to most of the players they have. And I think a couple of players that they bought last year should go on and be even better this year. Like, Mwepu, we saw in flashes last year how good he can be. And I think it stands to reason that he becomes a bit more of an important player this year and so on. But they are still at times going like 3-4 matches where they play well, should take at least 9 points and take maybe 2, maybe 5, maybe only 4. And it really
0.
does hamper you. Yeah, I mean, it's a real hamper for them, if they're trying to push on and be not just a mid-table team, but towards that top 8, which is a big thing to break into at this point in the Premier League. You need very, very good players at both ends of the pitch. Myself and David have obviously spoken about Robert Sanchez quite a lot, and neither of us love him to bits, but he's serviceable for them. He's not any worse than what is around the teams who are around Brighton in the table. So it's doable, but their forward line is lower down than the rest of them. Creativity is fine, the build-up play is fine, but I mean, look at the goals again they scored last season. I mean, Wolves did score fewer than them, but Wolves only scored about once every 8 months last season, so they don't really count. But they scored 20 goals fewer than Leicester, who finished 1 point ahead of them. I mean, it makes a big, big difference. If they could sort out that, if they could add, I don't know, maybe even another centre mid as well, but certainly a forward, someone who's going to be capable of even like 14 goals a season, it would make such a difference for them.
Yeah, Dave, and you've obviously championed this on both this and two-footed. It seemingly they think Undav is going to be the guy. I know he had a great record in Belgium for their sister club type thing, but that's a big leap of faith from someone who did it in Belgium.
It's an enormous leap of faith, and I think it's a foolish leap of faith as well, to be quite honest. Going into this summer, I thought they needed 5 players, starting centre-back, starting midfielder to replace Basuma, a starting 9, a backup right wing-back behind Tariq Lamptey, and another player in central defence for depth. And they've addressed none of it. They brought in Enciso. He looks talented, but he's a child. They brought in Adringa. They've sent him out on loan. I don't know what the plan is at Brighton, and like they could lose Cucurella. So is Solly March going to remain a starter? Because if he is,
well, they're linked with that Nuno Tavares, which from Arsenal, who's
just not good.
Yeah,
like he's just not a good player. And I'm like the other part of this is it's not just Basuma that they sold. They sold Ostergaard as well, who could have been that starting centre-back. They could have just brought him back, having had him on loan the last 3 years, and made him the starting centre-back because he's really good. But they haven't done that. So you're going to be looking at starting Joel Veltman again, or if Cucurella stays, starting him at centre-back rather than playing him as a left wing-back where you get one of the best left wing-backs in the league. I get that they're being financially cautious because that's just how Brighton operate. But I feel like they're letting down Graham Potter. And I feel like this is why when Leicester sack Rodgers or Villa sack Gerrard or Everton sack Lampard or whatever happens in those regards, when Graham Potter gets that call, because he will be top of the list for a bunch of clubs when they need a manager, he's going to look at it and go, well, I've been here 3 years. You've never bought me the striker I wanted. Neil Maupay's left, which looks like it's going to happen because I've got Dennis Undav and fucking Danny Welbeck. I mean, Danny Welbeck is one of your starting forwards in 2022-23. Danny Welbeck hasn't been good at football in about 8 years, and he's going to be your starter. It's just a disaster. I have them taking a step back. I have them finishing in 11th as things stand. Obviously, there's still time to go in the window, but for me, they're weaker in midfield. I think the defence will take a step back. You can only patch things together for so long. And not having an out-and-out goal scorer. I mean, Undav had a great season last year. I won't take that away from him. But it's not like this is some young player coming in who's got massive potential for growth. He's 26. He's close to being what he is. And like, if we look at his career, I have to ask why it took him so long to get into the top flight. Last season was his first season playing in the top flight anywhere. He played in the 4th division in Germany for 4 years. Then he played in the 3rd division in Germany for 2 years. Then the 2nd division in Belgium. Then the 1st division in Belgium. And I just don't really understand how you're expecting him to step up into the Premier League and get you 14, 15, 16 goals. I just think it's an enormous ask. I'm sure he's a good player. But again, the other thing with him is he's not a line leader. Like, he's not your out-and-out centre forward. He needs movement of players around him because he's all about movement. He's basically Neil Maupay, stylistically. He's a better finisher than Maupay, but he's Neil Maupay. And I'm not sure he's as good a player as Maupay all round. So huge ask to expect him to get you the goals you need. I have them in 11th.
Yeah, Karl, I think midfield looks promising with Caicedo and Weber, as you said. I like the starting defence. Depth's probably an issue there, unless there's some youngsters coming through that I'm not sure about. But yeah, the attack is the issue. I mean, final thoughts on them, and then where you think they'll finish.
Still a long way to go in the window, but I do think that they need to add right throughout the spine, to be fair, if they want to move up from where they were. I think if you look at what other teams around them have done, you at least need a forward and a midfielder to stay where they were, and then you probably need a really, really dominant defender and to replace Kukurea, his output, and probably then to get more out of Tariq Lamptey again. If you want to actually move up the table. I don't think that Brighton are set to do that at the minute. I've got them 12th, actually, so 3 places back.
I originally had them 10th, but the more I think about it, I think they will drop off. I think Basuma was playing at such a level. I know Caicedo finished the season really well, but it's a big ask for him. And then, well, he'll end up playing next to Adam Lallana, let's be honest. So, same issue. So I have them as 12th as well. Moving on to Wolves. Karl, your least favourite team in the league that we established before we started recording. Only bought in Nathan Collins. Raul Jimenez got injured in pre-season as well. That's apparently going to be about 8 weeks, so that's 8 games to start the season. They have no other striker as well, because Fabio Silva, their record signing, I believe, went to Anderlecht, I think it was. So, yeah, a poor season by Wolves because they missed out on a few midfield targets as well.
Yeah, not a tremendously exciting summer so far. I mean, they made Hwang permanent as well, which I think was a good deal for them, to be fair. I do like how he started last season, although he did fade quite badly, obviously, later on. They need... what do they need? They need to be a bit more interesting is what they need, because, as you just said, I'm quite frankly a bit bored of looking at this Wolves squad, and it just looks the same year after year, more or less. So... positives, Adama Traore is back and they haven't sold him yet, so we'll see what happens there. Whether that actually turns out to be a positive, I think depends on what system they end up playing. Obviously, there's been a suggestion they can go to the 4. I've not seen them in pre-season, so I don't know if they've been doing that in defence or not. Pedro Neto back to full fitness is a big thing for them. And who the hell knows what's going to happen with Morgan Gibbs-White, because he seems to be very, very in demand everywhere except for at actually Wolves. They've loaned him out and they've not really put him as a first teamer, and he's rated as a £20 million signing this summer for like Everton or Forest or people like that who are going for him. So do they actually play these players? I mean, they certainly have the attackers to play a 4-2-3-1 and have it look quite exciting in terms of the build-up play and how fast they could be and all the rest of that. But like you say, Raul Jimenez obviously hasn't quite returned the same player anyway since his big injury. And if he's out again, then you're probably relying on Hwang as your starting centre forward, unless you want to go with Daniel Podence as a bit of a withdrawn option. But
as the falsest of nines.
Yes, the very falsest. I mean, I've spoken before about Podence. I really like him as a second forward or a 10 even, but you don't want to play him as your number 9. Big thing for them this summer, obviously, is going to ensure that they do whatever is necessary to never play Patrick Catrone another minute of football ever. He was an abysmal signing at the time. He's been abysmal since then, wherever he's been, and they just need to get rid however is possible. Wolves,
probably the starting number 9 at the minute.
I mean, if they do that, by all means, but then I'll have to reevaluate this prediction of them going back 3 places as well. I have them in 13th.
Yeah, Dave, I mean, it looks like they're relying on young players coming through that they've already signed. That Mosquera, who got injured at the start of last season, replacing people like, oh my God, what's his name? What's the Moroccan centre?
Romain Saiss.
That's the one. So replacing him with like that. Totti come through the second half of last season. And then players like Chiquinho, who they signed in January. But yeah, it doesn't really... They missed out on Paulinho. They've been linked with Mateus Nunes, but only got Nathan Collins. I mean, has Mendes been busy this summer?
He must be. I like. How do you miss out on Paulinho to Fulham? I just don't understand how that happened. But look, I do like a whole bunch of the players here. Like, I think Rayan Aït-Nouri is one of the best young left backs in the world. I think Pedro Neto was absolutely outstanding. And if they're playing a 4-2-3-1 with Aït-Nouri and Neto as the left side, that's as good as most teams have in the league, down one flank. The issue would be the other flank, where Semedo's okay, but he's out injured at the minute. And I don't really know who the right winger is going to be, unless it's going to be Adama, who just didn't seem to get on with Bruno Lage last season. Maybe it's Chiquinho, but it means a big ask. It's big that they've kept Ruben Neves. I think that's a big deal for them. But going into this window, my assumption again was that they'd stick with a back 3. Though I do think a back 4 suits them better and suits Lage better. I love the signing of Nathan Collins. I think he's a really good centre back, and I think people will be surprised at how good he is this season. I think Max Kilman is excellent. I'm looking forward to seeing what Mosquera can offer, because if he is as good as he looked in the brief bits I saw when he was at Atletico Nacional, then having him, Collins and Kilman as a 3 could be excellent. I think they probably need a 1 in midfield, which I think they've acknowledged with their pursuits of Paulinho and Mateus Nunes. And I wonder if they might end up with Nunes if we don't go in for him, or if a bigger club doesn't go in for him. Maybe they just get him late in the window. They should have kept Trincao. They could have got him on loan with a cheap option to buy. They decided not to do it. They needed a striker anyway. I mean, Raul Jimenez isn't good enough to be a starting Premier League striker now. He just isn't. They needed a striker. They haven't addressed it. They need a backup goalkeeper as well, because John Ruddy left. And they've got Sarkic, who's not very good, and Andreas Sondergaard, who I've never laid eyes on. I think there's a lot of questions over this Wolves team. I have them taking some steps back. I don't think they'll be in any risk of relegation. I've seen a few people tout them for relegation. They'll be too good defensively to go down. But I think 13th is about right. I think they will step back to about there. So, yeah, I'll put Wolves in 13th. But I think they will have a top 8 defensive record in the league, and probably the worst attacking record in the league again.
Yeah, I think that's true. Obviously, the window's not done, but almost similarly to Graham Potter, if a job comes up, Bruno Lage is going to be in the mix for many of them. And he may be more, I suppose Potter worked in Sweden. I think they'll both be open to foreign jobs as well. So it's a lot of markets for them. You said 13th as well, didn't you, Karl? I just forgot to note it down.
I did.
Yeah. On to Newcastle then, and I'll start with you, Dave. I have not been looking at the transfers. They haven't done loads, though. So in Alex Murphy from Galway, Nick Pope, Matt Targett, Sven Botman, and Charlie MacArthur from Kilmarnock. So not loads. it's almost sensible from them, Dave. They obviously, Sven Botman was a long-term target. They wanted him when they initially got the money. I think we'd all agree they still need more. But it's almost scarily promising from our point of view that they've not just gone mental and spent, basically not gone and signed Neymar, for instance.
Well, I think it's good for them that they haven't signed Neymar as well. I think it does show restraint. They got Dan Ashworth from Brighton to kind of oversee things as a director of football. He's excellent, one of the best in the business. I think the signings are smart, if a little unsexy. I mean, Botman's a great signing for them, but they need another centre-back to go with him. Matt Targett's not an exciting left-back, but he's a solid left-back, so they had him last season. It made sense to keep him. Nick Pope is a decent upgrade on Dubravka. Not a spectacular signing, but a very solid signing. I still have them needing a starting centre-back to go with Botman, a starting defensive midfielder to play with Guimaraes and Joelinton in the 3, and a starting winger to go with St. Maximin and I assume Callum Wilson.
Just saying, Miguel Amron scored about 100 goals in pre-season.
Yeah, to be fair, he has had a great pre-season, but I mean, the guy just hasn't delivered in the Premier League yet. So until I see that, and I think the same goes with them. I mean, they've been linked with Diaby and a few others. I think they'll be better. I do think they'll be better. I never felt like the squad they had under Steve Bruce should have been a team nailed to the foot of the table, not winning any games anyway. I think there is talent there. I think if you can roll out Pope, Trippier, even Fabian Schär, Botman, Target, Joelinton, let's say Longstaff or Shelvey, Guimaraes, Almiron, Wilson, and St. Maximin. I think there's enough there. Given I see step backs for Wolves, for Brighton, and for Leicester, I do think there's an opening for them. Given the form they showed in the back half of last season, I think they could finish 9th. And they're going to add as well, but I'm going to go 9th.
Yeah, I think they'll certainly improve just by the fact they don't have Steve Bruce doing pre-season, which obviously always helps. Karl, your thoughts on Newcastle, and this could hinge quite a bit on the remaining business they have to do?
I do think that if they do further business, and at the very least, I would expect them to add a wide forward, given what they've got there and what Eddie Howe's trying to do. But even right now, to be honest, I have Newcastle 8th. You look at the performances and the results that they had across the last third of last season. All of those teams around them, the Leicesters, Wolves, Palaces, whoever else, pick whoever you want, they were better than all of them. All of them. Just with those couple of signings that they made, just with being a bit more organised across midfield. Obviously, they had relegation to fight for at the earliest points of that. But even going towards the end of the season, they still quite comfortably beat Arsenal when they played them. And I don't see that there's a massive, massive difference between, let's say, who have we already done? West Ham and Man United, let's say. We've already done that sort of top 6. Last season, at the end of the campaign, the big gap after Liverpool and Man City was between 5th and 6th. There was 11 points between Arsenal and Man United. Now, I would think that this year, that first big gap is going to come between the top 7 and then the rest. And at the minute, I think Newcastle will be the best of the rest as it is. There's a lot to be said for continuity. They obviously got themselves a really good mindset and team ethic and all the rest from the group who were involved. The one thing I would be a little bit concerned about is that last season they had to leave out a few players from the actual Premier League squad that they named for the second half of the season because of the transfers that they made. And they've not actually offloaded very many of them yet. When you consider, obviously, Botman has come in, Pope's come in, they've got to be registered. There's only a few of them have left who were even in that squad. So people like Dwight Gale, Isaac Hayden, they're not going to make any difference whatsoever to the squad in terms of not being there because they didn't really contribute in the second half of last season. So they have added and they haven't offloaded. So there's still going to be a group of players there who are training and there every day, knowing they're not going to be involved. So that's one minor consideration. I expect that a bunch of them will go on loan and all the rest of it before the end of the transfer window. But the rest of it, I think Eddie Howe's probably in a really good place right now. He's not going to be under enormous pressure to, immediately win a title or a trophy of any kind or get into the Champions League or anything like that. If Newcastle finish in the top half, which is only 1 place and 2 points above what they managed last season, that's already a progress season. So I think it's fairly low key for them at the moment. The fact that they've not gone out and spent the money that some people were suggesting that they might do. They do still have FFP considerations to take into account from not good spending in previous years, let's say. And I mean, right now it's okay because they've not got wild competition. The teams that we've already discussed, West Ham aside, we look at them as perhaps taking backward steps at the minute. And they've got more work to do. And Newcastle, at the very least, have made small steps forward. And like I said, at the end of last season, they were already better than these sides. So I don't see anything other than reasonably straightforward progress for Newcastle this season.
Yeah, I have them 8th as well, almost by default, because you mentioned there, I think the teams that were around them haven't really made the progress they wanted to. So yeah, I think they'll be ones who make leaps, but maybe not anywhere near the European spots yet. But promising for the season after. On the Palace then, and Dave, I know you like quite a lot of their business. Malcolm, yes, from Derby, who seems to be in the first team picture already by what Vieira said. Sam Johnston on a free, not sure if he'll be the out-and-out number one just yet, but Czech Doucouré, I know you're a fan of, you wanted him at Liverpool in a post-Chimeni world. Carmack Austin, no idea. And Chris Richards from Bayern Munich got confirmed yesterday, I believe. So yeah, I mean, Crystal Palace almost feels like they're just steadily progressing after a lot of upheaval last season.
I think they've had an absolutely excellent window so far. Still think they've got a bit more to do. I think Johnston's an upgrade in goal. He's not a great goalkeeper, but I think he's an upgrade in goal. Eboué is going to be another really exciting option for them in the attack. I think Doucouré is one of the signings of the summer. I think he's absolutely perfect for what they want to do. And Chris Richards, I mean, they were crying out for a quality third centre-back, and I think they got him in Chris Richards. Still think they need a right back, still think they need one more in midfield, and I still think they could do with another backup centre-back, maybe someone with a bit of experience, someone a bit of an older head. But I love what they've done. I think you get Eze back fully fit now, as opposed to last season when he was coming off the Achilles tear. I think that's a big plus. You get a second season Odsonne Edouard. I think he'll take a step forward. Michael Olise should play a lot more this season. I think he's one of the most exciting players in the league. I think Mark Guehi will take another step forward. I think he was absolutely tremendous last season. The partnership with him and Anderson is one of the best in the league. Mitchell, I expect to take a step forward at left back as well. I think he's very, very good. I have Crystal Palace finishing 8th. I really like this team. I really like this team. I think there's a lot of talent here. I think they're really hard to beat. I think they've got all the creativity you need. And if Edouard and Mateta and Zaha can put the ball in the net often enough, I think they're going to finish 8th. I would prefer this team to Newcastle's team as a starting 11. I also think they've got some really interesting depth pieces, some really interesting young players. I have them in 8th. I think this is a really good team.
I actually have them in 9th. So yes, it's almost similar progress. I mean, Karl, your thoughts on where they'll finish?
I have them 9th as well. Yeah, another season of really good progress. The only real question marks I have at this point is that it is quite a young group being put together, which, while that's really good and exciting for their future, and obviously everything there is positive about it, there will come a few games where either a few of them don't have the best form, or they come up against a bit of a setback in a couple of matches and they find it a bit more difficult to react to and overcome. And you're going to be looking at people then like Joachim Anderson, probably, maybe White if he's still involved, and presumably somewhere along the line somebody out of Milivojevic or MacArthur or whoever it is still going to be there or thereabouts in midfield. Those players would then really have to step up and sort of help the younger players through them, because as absolutely fun as it's going to be watching people like Michael Leese and all the rest of them rip it up at times this season, they've not really had to have in their careers as yet that period where you're under scrutiny. Now you have to actually perform every week. It's not about you being one of the best players in the second tier. This is, you have to be on it every single game, every single minute, performing at every single ground that you play at, against every type of opponent and all the rest of it. It's a tough thing to do. Now, they definitely have the talent, no question. But with all young players, it has to be a learning curve. You only got to look at people like Trent Alexander-Arnold. We've seen him have really difficult games, and it's about who you have around you to help you through it, the trust from the manager and all the rest of it. So it will happen to these Palace players at certain stages of the season. And I wonder whether it's not quite the number of very strong characters of the senior players. I wouldn't really look at Ayew and Benteke as that kind of character. Maybe they are behind closed doors, but they don't come across that way on the pitch, for example. Wilf Zaha, another one. I don't really think he's a leader because of the way that he reacts when he has difficult periods or things go against him in the games. I think he's one who actually needs to be calmed down rather than someone who's going to be doing that for other people. So Vieira's got a big job on to manage that side of the team. But as for the actual team building that they've done, the recruitment over the last season and a bit, unbelievable. Really, really good. I love Cheick Doucouré. I think he's a great player. And if they persist with a two-man midfield and two wide forwards and two forwards basically through the middle, Doucouré is one of the best that they could have got for that. It's obviously going to be a big thing of who they partner him with. And they have played three in midfield plenty of times. So
I'm guessing Will Hughes, anyway. Unless they add someone.
Hughes is the best fit at the minute because he's the best runner. But I mean, that's a pretty easy upgrade, isn't it? If you're looking at 2 or 3 seasons to come and you want a very, very strong, powerful runner, but who could play the ball a little bit and support from a little bit further upfield as well, you could pick about 50 players better than
I was listening to a podcast the other day saying Eze might be in midfield. Obviously, they probably need a better holding.
If it's a 3, I think Eze plays in midfield. Eze, Doucouré +1 is the 3.
Would it be MacArthur for now?
It could be MacArthur. It could be Milivojevic. If they want to play Doucouré, maybe is a bit more of an 8. It could be Will Hughes. They've got options. I do think they need one more in midfield, a starter in midfield to go with Doucouré and Eze, someone to be that sort of in-between player. And then that gives you Elise, Zaha and Edouard as a front 3, which could be very, very exciting. Right back is the biggest concern for me, though, because Joel Ward looked washed last season and the other options, Nathaniel Klein. Now, if Nathan Ferguson can ever get fit, it could be him. But, I mean...
He doesn't exist.
The young fella has just had the worst luck. He in his career has played 22 games and only one of them has come in the last 2.5 seasons. So he's just been very, very unfortunate with injuries. But he's very, very talented. I do agree with Karl that the one doubt about this group is the lack of experienced leaders. It will take the likes of Milivojevic and MacArthur, who aren't going to be starters, to really embrace that leadership role, to become almost like assistant coaches and really start to talk people through games from the bench. James Tompkins, I think, can slot in there as well into that sort of role. Like, there's a good balance of experience and youth, because you've still got Gaeta, you've still got Jeff Schlupp, Benteke, Ayew, those kind of players. But as Karl said, they've never really shown leadership on the pitch. They're probably quite good off the pitch and can guide players off the pitch. But I also think when you get outside the top 6 or 7, the European spots, inconsistency is just part of what it is to be a club in that 8th and below kind of range. So we'll expect that they will be inconsistent at some point. I just think the talent is more reliable than the talent at any other club outside of the top 7.
Yeah, and I think just the backbone of the team as well with Gahey and Anderson, I think it's just a really good base to build from. So, yeah. I know Karl only has about 10 minutes left, so we'll try and do these next two quickly. And it's only two because Karl insisted on having Aston Villa on this podcast for some reason. But we'll do Brentford, and I will start with you, Dave. Max Dickov in, Max Wilcox in, Aaron Hickey in, Keane Lewis Potter, most Tory name in the world in, Kyrese Lisby, Thomas Truscocha, I can't say his name, what the hell did I say there? We'll move on. Yarmo Liuk and Ben Mee in. And only person of note they've lost is Christian Eriksen, really. Second season syndrome and all that jazz, but I think if they finish outside of a relegation scrap, I think that's another successful season. So I have them 14th.
Yeah, I think staying in the division is all that really matters. Is all that really matters for Brentford. Nothing else concerns me. Just stay in the division. I love Aaron Hickey. I'm not 100% certain about Aaron Hickey as a right back because he's a left back, but he is a two-footed player, so he should be able to do a very good job there. Keane Lewis Potter, second most Tory name in the world. Let's not take Kieran Dewsbury Hall's title away from him.
Yes, of course.
But he's a very good player. Strakosha, if he can rediscover his form, he can absolutely be the starting goalkeeper. Yarmouk, talented, but I, as far as I know, he's been largely signed to play for the B team this season. And Ben Mee is a good addition at centre back. I mean,
I like Ben Mee. To be fair.
I mean, he can either be a starter or he can be depth. I still think they need a bit more. I still think they could do with another wing back depth. I still think they need a starting midfielder to replace Eriksen, and maybe one more at centre back because they did lose a couple. They lost Sanka, they lost Janvier, and like a couple that were there last season just weren't good enough, like Charlie Good. So definitely one more there. I have them finishing 16th.
Right. Okay.
But I think they like I said, all I think they need to do to concern themselves with is stay up. Nothing else matters. Just stay in the division. And I think they'll do that. So I've got them 16th.
16th. Karl, yeah, I think Eriksen is the key because when he got settled in, he basically saved them from getting dragged into a relegation scrap. Obviously, David Raya came back at that time. I know some people have mentioned Josh De Silva might get a run out after his injury issues. He might fix some of that creative balance in midfield. But yeah, what do you think of Brentford for next season?
So I actually completely missed the Thomas Strakosha deal until about 2 days ago. So I didn't even.
Because you went on 12 holidays.
Yeah. It was a much needed break. I can't do this once I'm director of football somewhere, obviously. But for now, it's completely fine to miss out that one of the best goalkeepers in Europe 2 years ago were moved to the Premier League. That's fine. If he gets back to his 1920 form, he is, I would say, top 6 goalkeeper in the Premier League. That simple. But he has had a bad 2 years. He lost his place a couple of seasons ago. He had a couple of injuries. He was back in and out last year, but not very good, not very consistent at all. He's 27. I mean, it's not old. It's not even really what you'd say is approach and peak for a goalkeeper's understanding positional play and all the rest of it. But I do really like Strakosha. I liked him quite a lot with Lazio beforehand, to be honest. So I'm hopeful that he gets back to the levels that he's capable of. I'm not the biggest fan of David Raya at all, to be fair. So again, I do think that is the possibility of being a big upgrade for Brentford. Aaron Hickey, if he goes in on the right-hand side of that of the wing-backs, then, as I've said several times before, not playing Roslav is the biggest bonus anybody could ask for. I will stick with that. I don't really know where they go here. I mean, I do think it's a decent addition to have Ben Mee just like in the middle of the back three, maybe just as you're clearing one and getting rid and all the rest of it. I think that's absolutely fine. Free transfers.
Some people saying they might play 4 at the back a bit more as well.
Yeah. That's again another step forward. And if that's the case, it's open, isn't it, to how well they adjust and how well they do? Because I think the midfield probably struggled last year because of the system that they played. I mean, I think Vitaly Janelt was really good for a while, but a couple of the others who came in and out of the team, not so much. But then on the other hand, you got people like Johan Wissa, Sergio Canos, even at the beginning of the season, if they were playing a 4-2-3-1 or something similar to that, would they have done as well as they did? I'm not entirely sure. I think that they were probably beneficiaries of the system. So there's lots of reasons to watch Brentford this year, just because of how interesting, how different it could look to last year. I've got to be honest and say, the man with the 3 surnames, I didn't really watch very much of Hull last year at all. So I'm keen to see how he does. Keane, Lewis, and Potter, all 3 of them. And I don't really know where they could go in terms of how high up the table. I think if they even manage to get as high as they did last season, I think that's probably an overachievement again. But a lot of last year was down to a really good start to the season. You know, there's a lot of energy last year at the beginning of the beginning of the season, especially at home. Brentford Community Stadium is a mad place to be in, and that's obviously going to be a big thing for them again this season. You look at their home record, 7 wins from the 19 games. Away from home, they only won 6, but that was better than most teams in the league last season. Not too many of them managed to pick up half a dozen wins on the road. So, like I say, they're going to be an interesting one. I do think they'll step back a little bit just because other teams below them probably have a bit more spending power and they brought in a few more established signings. But I do still have them in 15th. I think they should be more or less fine.
Yeah, I certainly think there's 3 worse teams than Brentford, even if second season thing is really real. But I think they've invested quite well, to be fair to them. Karl, I'll stick with you, seeing as you insisted on putting these in the podcast, just for even numbers. But Aston Villa, where is my signings tab? Coutinho in, Kamara in, Diego Carlos in, Robin Olsen in as backup goalkeeper, Rory Wilson from Rangers, I'm guessing he's a youngster, and Ludwig Augustinson, I can't say his bloody name, in as backup left back. So that means less Ashley Cole, and they've not really lost anyone of note other than, I think Wesley was their record signing at some point. He's on another loan. Trezeguet, Matt Target, yada, 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 who cares? But Villa, I feel like this goes 2 ways. It either goes really well and Gerrard really progresses as a coach and the team clicks, or Gerrard's sacked by the World Cup and it goes terribly.
I mean, Villa are a very demanding club, so it could actually be both of those things, that they do improve and they go higher than last season, but he still gets the boot because there's not enough. 2 really, really important things that Aston Villa have done this summer. One is to offload Lovre Kalinic, because that club had more goalkeepers on their books than should ever be allowed for one professional club. So good to see them slimming down the options.
Do they still have Nyland?
No, I think Owen Nyland's gone.
Ah, what a legend.
Yeah, he's in the wind, I believe.
The only person who defeated goal line technology.
The other thing that they've done is actually a much more recent thing. I think it was only yesterday it was confirmed, but Tyrone Mings has been stripped of the captaincy. So I think that this is quite obviously a precursor to, you're not playing anymore, mate. It's a much easier thing to do when he's not the captain. New skipper is going to be John McGinn, for anybody who hasn't seen. So I think that that's probably speaks volumes to what Gerrard is looking for in defence, and that is to be better.
Probably more interesting, he's not even the vice captain as well. I think that was Martinez who got made vice captain, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Ashley Young was club captain, which I can see the logic in taking away the team captaincy. I think when you strip him of the captaincy altogether, I think you've gone a step too far, and I think he might have just created himself a major problem in that dressing room, because Tyrone Mings is a very influential player. He's also an England regular in the squad, and if he starts to voice his disapproval, I think it could go badly for Gerrard. I don't think Gerrard has handled a couple of big decisions this summer well. Don't think he's done well with the Chukwuemeka thing, and I think he's just handled this badly. Why has he waited until 10 days before the start of the season to do this? This should have been done in June, not now.
To be fair, it might have been, but it might have just been public release now. Possibly.
Mings was wearing the captain's armband in pre-season.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yes, that's a bit dumb. Well, Karl, do you want to go back on what you were saying?
Well, no, I mean, in terms of captaincy, I mean, Gerrard's been there the other side of the equation, obviously, when he was at Liverpool and took it off Sami Hyypiä. So I presume he would have been party to discussions, or at least know what Gerard Houllier told Sami Hyypiä at the time, for example, and know how Sami would react. And there was the whole thing about wanting him to focus a bit more on his game rather than having to lead the team. So maybe something like that has been said by Gerrard. We need you to focus on being the best defender you can and not have to worry about all the rest of the players. Concentrate on your own game. Sammy at the time was going through a bit of a difficult spell, obviously. So no comparison between the defenders. I'm just saying, as a manager, you need to have something to tell the player that you're taking it off. So maybe it's something along those lines. If Mings causes a problem, I mean, the very, very easy thing to do here is show him a video highlights reel of what he did last season. Because you know what? He was in shambles. He was an absolute train wreck.
The season before.
So I'm going to stick, obviously without knowing anything from the inside, I'm going to stick in Gerrard's corner here. It had to be done. There had to be a way to do it. And maybe the timing could be better. Maybe the reasoning could be better. But it's really difficult to know that without obviously being on the inside of that. Obviously, the one downside here is that it looks like Diego Carlos is going to be the one who basically has to be a lot better than Tyrone Mings was. And as I've said before, I have my very, very big doubts about him. He's not an elite level defender. Probably Villa couldn't have got an elite level defender this year anyway, but is he even a big upgrade? It's all about the partnership. And last season, obviously, Conte didn't have the best of years ever. I can't imagine Diego Carlos was sold Aston Villa on the idea of partnering Courtney Hawser or someone like that. So we'll see how they go.
Remember his outside the foot pass, lads. That was saucy.
Dave, do you know, has Kamara been playing defensive mid or centre back during pre-season at all?
Defensive mid for the most part.
Okay, so I mean, this is.
But the issue is, Cons has missed pre-season because he's been injured.
He was on the bench actually the other day, so
he hasn't. I don't think he's really trained yet. So they haven't had the chance to, because Cons and Carlos make sense as the pairing. Yeah. It's just they haven't had the opportunity to play together yet. So Mings will likely start the season. So my thing about, I agree it had to be done. Like I'd have been trying to sell him this summer. I think you'd have found a sucker that would have bought him. But exactly. Like some new stupid club, you might have even convinced Scotty Tuchel to take him down at Bournemouth. But if he starts the season, and say he starts the season playing well, he's still Tyrone Mings. You still want him out of your team. So it's when he goes out of the team, like with Sammy, Houllier could tell him, look, you're still my best centre back by a mile. So you're still going to be in the team every week with Mings. If he's made him the promise that you're still going to be in the team every week and then he drops him, I think that's where the problems will start. I like their business. I think keeping Coutinho was smart. I agree with Karl on Carlos. He's good. He's not very good. He's rash. He's error prone. He loves to drag hold of a jersey. The Kamara signing, great. I think the Augustinsson signing is clever as a backup left back. Robin Olsen makes sense to keep him. If they have targeted the positions of need, they still need a backup right back, though maybe that's Ashley Young this season, which isn't ideal, but it is what it is. I still think they need one up front because I just don't know where the goals come from. Ollie Watkins is a good player. He's not a great goal scorer. I have them in 12th, and I think that's problematic for Gerrard because I think his mandate this season is going to be top half.
He said himself it's 7th.
Yeah, I just don't see it. 7th is Europe.
Mm-hmm.
7th is a European position, and I just don't see it. I think there's 11 teams quite clearly better than them as things stand. Now, if they were to go out tomorrow and buy Ivan Toney and land him in this team as their new number 9, I think that could change everything for them. But I just don't see it with them right now. I think 12th is about the highest I can push them.
I have them 10th basically by default because I haven't pre-planned my table. But Karl, where do you have them?
Right, between the two of you, I have them in 11th. I think, 7th is way beyond the stretch of what they've got at the minute. They need at least 3 of those players from last season to have enormously improved season, starting with Leon Bailey. They need to find a role for him if they believe that he's capable of whatever it is that they believe he's capable of. Again, he's another one who I've never been that high on. Talented on the ball, but productivity, work rate off it, tactical versatility, not for me. I don't really like Leon Bailey that much. But if they think that he is, one of the ones who's capable of being a top 6, top 7 sort of player, you've got to find the role for him. Whether it's a 4-3 one, he's just on the left and Coutinho is the 10, but then you've got to get everything out of Coutinho, and everything has to go through him in terms of your central mid build-up play. Then you've got to be able to have a double pivot midfield who can support him and not let him have to do so much. Or is he going to be an 8 and it's going to be Kamara as the 6? There's got to be a bit more tactical cohesion and consistency, I think, to Villa this year. I really liked it when they played the Diamond at times last year, and I think that that's probably one of the things that benefits Danny Ings a little bit better as well. If you've got Watkins running the channel and Ings can just be the 9 as such, and then you've got Coutinho behind, but then where do you play Emi Buendia? Where do you play Leon Bailey? They don't fit in those roles. So it's a quite unbalanced top third of the team, I think, at the minute. And yeah, I really struggle to see Gerrard getting them, let's say, beyond 10th, because they could, Leicester, Villa, all of those teams are going to be within a few points of each other. But
they need a young player, like, say, Cameron Archer, to do what Ramsey did for them last season and come out of nowhere, kick on and make a big impact, because it's very unbalanced up front. It's quite inconsistent up front. I mean, Watkins is inconsistent. Ings is inconsistent. The reason Coutinho is at Aston Villa is because he's been inconsistent now for 4 years. Buendia is inconsistent. Bertrand Traore is inconsistent. Leon Bailey is inconsistent. Like, this is the issue with them, is that they're just a very inconsistent group of players, even in that midfield. I mean, John McGinn, I think he's one of the most overrated players in the league. Douglas Luiz, he's massively inconsistent. Morgan Sanson is inconsistent. I mean, I don't know that Gerrard knows his best 11 right now, which is a little bit concerning to me. Now, maybe he does. Maybe he has it in his head what his 11 is, but from what I've seen of their preseason, I'm not sure he does. And if he goes with Carlos and Mings as his centre-back pairing, I think he's asking for trouble.
Yeah, should be fun. I mean, last question before we go. I know you're in a bit of a rush there, Karl. Gerrard finished the season as manager?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes. I think he'll get the campaign, but if it is a mid-table 10th, 11th, 12th kind of anonymous points haul, that'll be it.
Interesting. Dave?
I'm going to say no. I don't think he'll see out the season. I think the loss of Michael Beale is massive.
Yeah.
I haven't been impressed with them tactically in pre-season. I know they brought in Neil Critchley, but I haven't been impressed with them at all in pre-season. Gerrard as a manager doesn't impress me. I know he had one good season at Rangers, but he also had 2 bad seasons at Rangers, where he spent, think about, at Rangers, he spent more money than the entire rest of the league combined, including Celtic. His wage bill was higher than the entire rest of the league. Not just the entire rest of the league, the entire rest of Scottish football combined, bar Celtic. I don't see it with him. I hope he does well, but I don't see it. And the elephant in the room here is Pochettino is sitting out there. You've got owners that are massively ambitious, who've got a track record of firing managers and coaches in other sports who are doing really well. Like the Milwaukee Bucks team, if they hadn't won the NBA title last year, Mike Budenholzer was getting sacked. If they didn't win the Eastern Conference, he was getting sacked. That was common knowledge. He won it. He won the titles. He got to keep his job. And he's one of the best coaches in the league. Gerrard isn't one of the best coaches in the Premier League. It wouldn't surprise me if they're struggling in the first half of the season and we get to the World Cup break. It wouldn't surprise me if the first game after the World Cup, Pochettino stood in the Villa dugout. And I think Villa are the type of club that Pochettino would be enticed to, because they are a big club. They do have a lot of history. They've got a great academy, a lot of good young players. There'll be money to spend.
Similar to Southampton when he went there.
Yeah, but a bigger club. I think
bigger,
similar to Spurs. Similar to Spurs. They're as big a club as Spurs. There's more money to spend than Spurs. They don't have a Kane, but Spurs didn't have the Harry Kane we know now before Pochettino either. So it wouldn't surprise me if Gerrard doesn't see the season out, which would be a shame, but I think Villa are really, really ambitious, and if he doesn't deliver this season, I don't think they'll be too long in moving him out.
Yeah, it's certainly an important season for Gerrard. But we will finish up there. We won't recap the table because I have noted it very messily, so I will make a proper graphic probably after we do the whole table, and I will put them in Discord and social media, etc. But that is it from us on AI Scouted. We'll have the relegation fodder later in the week. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Goodbye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.